Get ready, because round 2 of bad versus good dialogue starts right now. I've got 5 brand new types of bad dialogue that I'm going to discuss. We got plenty of examples. We're going to have a lot of fun. By the way, my name is Brandon McNulty. I'm the author of Bad Parts, also the author of Entry Wounds, and welcome to my writing channel. Last year I did a video on the subject of bad versus good dialogue, and a lot of people found this video helpful. They enjoyed it, so we're going to revisit it today, and I'm going to explore some other types of bad dialogue that I didn't cover last time. And what we're going to do, basically, we're going to talk about what makes good dialogue good, what makes bad dialogue bad, and we're going to compare and contrast examples of both. But let's start off by talking about what makes good dialogue good. And 3 things factor in here. The first thing is that good dialogue sounds natural and appropriate. And this is going to involve things like the character speaking it, the setting where it's spoken, and the tone of the story. Different stories will require a specific type of dialogue. For instance, in Star Wars, what Yoda says wouldn't work if it were spoken by Rocky Balboa in his movies. And at the same time, what Rocky says in his movies wouldn't work if they were spoken by Yoda in the Star Wars movies. Another thing good dialogue does, it attacks and defends. Every time a character speaks, they should be trying to learn something, to hide something, to intimidate someone, to protect someone, etc. And then the third thing good dialogue does, it expresses unspoken meaning or subtext. In other words, when a character speaks, there should be meaning beneath the surface of their words. Now here's a clip from The Dark Knight that hits on all 3 of these points. It's the interrogation scene between Commissioner Gordon and the Joker. And while you're watching it, pay attention to how it hits on all 3 of those things I just mentioned.
Harvey Dent never made it home.
Of course not.
What have you done with him?
Me? I was right here. Who did you leave him with? Your people?
Okay, so in this clip, the Joker and Commissioner Gordon both sound natural, and their dialogue attacks and defends. Gordon attacks the Joker, who defends himself, and then launches a counterattack against Gordon. And during this discussion, there's subtext because the Joker denies that he played a role in Harvey Dent's disappearance, which, of course, he orchestrated. Alright, now let's talk about bad dialogue. And for today's video, I came up with 5 brand new types of bad dialogue that I didn't cover in the previous video. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through each type, I'm going to explain what it is, then I'm going to give you an example of the bad dialogue, and then I'm going to give you a good example that you can use in its place. The first type of bad dialogue is name calling, and this is when characters address one another by name. Hi Brandon, I subscribe to your channel, Brandon. I enjoy your videos, Brandon. The problem with addressing someone directly is that normally we don't do this in conversation. It often sounds awkward, and in the case of stories, it hurts the pacing. And it's unnecessary to have name calling in your dialogue unless your characters are either trying to get someone's attention or they're trying to make a point. Now for a bad example of this, let's take a look at Titanic, particularly the scene where Rose rescues Jack. And if you remember, toward the end of the movie, Jack is handcuffed to a pipe in one of the rooms below deck. And the ship's starting to get flooded, and when Rose finds him, they have this exchange.
Jack! Rose! Jack! Jack! Listen, Rose, you're gonna have to find a spare key, all right? It's a little silver one, Rose. Check right here, Rose.
There's no key!
All right, Rose, listen.
The constant name calling sucks here because it draws attention to itself. Listen, Rose, it's the silver one, Rose. Right here, Rose. Rose, Rose, Rose. It adds unnecessary fluff to the scene, and only the initial Jack, Rose exchange is necessary because that's when they're trying to get each other's attention. Now, for a good example of this, let's take a look at The Godfather, specifically the scene in Las Vegas where Michael and Fredo have an exchange. And if you remember, toward the end of the movie, Michael takes over as the head of the family, he flies out to Vegas, and he tries to bully the casino owner, Mo Green, into selling him the casino. And things get heated between the two of these guys, and Michael's brother Fredo, who has spent a lot of time with Mo Green, he tries to intervene between them. And after Mo Green leaves the room, Michael and Fredo have this exchange.
Mike, you don't come to Las Vegas and talk to a man like Mo Green like that!
Fredo, you're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
So this one works because Michael and Fredo are both making serious points, and the name calling here sounds natural in the heat of an argument. There's also a sense of punch and counterpunch. Fredo tries to take the high ground, then Michael knocks him back down to earth. And when they call each other out by name, it has impact. The second type of bad dialogue is preachy dialogue. And this is when the writer forces a message into a character's mouth. So the character is plainly stating things like a lesson or an opinion or a moral that the story itself should be conveying. And oftentimes audiences get really frustrated with this because when you're preaching to an audience, you're insulting them, you're telling them how to think. They don't like this, so you want to try and avoid it. Now, for a bad example, let's take a look at the 90s movie The Crow. And if you haven't seen this movie, it's actually a really good one. It's a revenge story about a guy who gets murdered and then resurrected a year later. And he gets an opportunity to take revenge on the people who killed him. And when he's not killing people, he's also trying to help out everybody who mattered to him during his natural life. But one problem with this movie is that it does get preachy with its anti-drug message. I'm going to play a clip for you right now, and in this scene, the Crow confronts a drug addict woman who has abandoned her daughter. And the scene takes place minutes after the woman has injected heroin.
Look. Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children. Do you understand? Morphine is bad for you. Your daughter is out there on the streets waiting for you.
Okay, so the problem I have here is with the line, morphine is bad for you. It's preachy, it's on the nose, and it's unnecessary. And not only that, it cheapens a powerful on-screen image, because that's a really cool moment when we see the heroin leaking out of her needle holes. That image should just stand on its own, and if it does stand on its own, it has plenty of impact. And another problem I have with that line, morphine is bad for you, is that it makes the following line feel preachier. That line about your daughter is out there on the streets waiting for you, when it follows that line, morphine is bad for you, it starts to feel like an anti-drug commercial, and that causes the scene to lose its impact. Now, for a good example, let's take a look at Requiem for a Dream. This is a movie about 4 different people struggling with addictions. And toward the end, there's a scene where Jared Leto's character goes to the hospital because his arm is in immense pain. He's been shooting up a lot. He needs medical attention. I'll play the scene for you right now.
What's the problem?
It's my arm. My arm's just killing me.
Let's have a look at it. All right. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, so this scene works because the dialogue here doesn't preach. It's simple and it's minimalist, but it sounds natural, and it allows the story to send the message. The doctor here doesn't preach to Jared Leto, he doesn't preach to the audience, instead he takes action, and those actions have impact. The third type of bad dialogue is filler dialogue. And this is bland, everyday speech. It doesn't push the plot forward. It doesn't reveal character. It often lacks focus, tension, or conflict. And oftentimes it'll sound too natural, meaning that you have aimless conversations or you have generic everyday exchanges, cliches, things like that. For a bad example, let's take a look at The Room. And if you haven't seen The Room, you really should. It's one of those movies that is just so terribly terrible that the whole thing ends up being hilarious. And it's supposed to be this tragic love story, but it's a complete mess, and the acting and the dialogue are just so bad, and the plot lines just fall apart, and you need to see it. But today I'm going to play for you a scene in which the main character, Johnny, goes into a flower shop to buy flowers.
Hi.
Can I help you?
Yeah, can I have a dozen red roses, please?
Oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't know it was you. Here you go.
That's me. How much is it?
It'll be $18.
Here you go. Keep the change. Hi, doggy.
You're my favorite customer.
Okay, so this sucks because it's generic, everyday dialogue. It's loaded with cliches. There's nothing unique about the word choice or phrasing. There's no tension. There's no conflict. There's no subtext. And in the end, it comes off as unintentionally funny. Now, for a good example, let's take a look at the first Rocky movie. And if you remember early on, Rocky goes into the pet shop where Adrian works, and he's hoping to strike up a conversation with her, and the exchange they have reveals character and establishes their relationship.
How you feeling this morning, huh? Full of life?
Fine.
Hey, how you doing, killer? How's the turtle food this week?
Fine.
Me, I'm kind of aggravated, you know?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's your fault. I'm just kind of aggravated. You know, you want to hear about it?
I'll tell you somebody don't want to hear about it.
Okay, so this dialogue, even though it's pretty mundane, it works because Rocky speaks like a unique character. Hey, how you doing? Full of life? Hey, how's the turtle food this week? This characterizes him really well, and we also get to see the relationship between Rocky and Adrian established here. Rocky wants her, but she's shy, and both characters are socially awkward, especially Adrian, who's very uncomfortable, and she replies in one-word answers that signal her discomfort. The fourth type of bad dialogue is relentlessly repeated phrases. And oftentimes when a phrase gets repeated over and over, that phrase loses its impact. And if you're not careful, repeated phrases can make the story feel like it's spinning its wheels. It may even feel like the character has nothing to say. A bad example of this comes from the later seasons of Game of Thrones, when Jon Snow constantly tells Daenerys that she is his queen. And he also tells everybody else who will listen that she is his queen. And the first time this happens, when they're having a quiet moment together and he tries to call her Danny, and she's like, no, don't call me Danny. My brother used to call me Danny. And then he says, okay, well, how about I call you my queen? That time it works because it's the first time we hear it, it has impact. But afterwards, when he keeps saying it again and again, it loses that impact.
Thank you, Danny.
Danny. He was the last person who called me that. I'm not sure. Was it my brother?
All right. Not Danny. How about my queen? Daenerys is our queen. She shouldn't be. You are my queen. That's her decision to make. She is our queen. And you will always be my queen. You are my queen. I don't know what else I can say.
This sucks because it's a bland, surface-deep phrase that is said way too often. You're my queen. I'll do anything for you. That's basically all he's saying. There's minimal subtext. There's minimal irony, with an exception of the final episode when he says it to her for the last time. And after we hear it for the first time, the phrase, when it gets repeated, it loses impact until it becomes laughable. Now, for a good example, let's take a look at the early seasons of Game of Thrones, specifically seasons 2 through 4. And if you remember, Jon Snow has a love interest named Ygritte, who's a wildling, and she's supposed to be his enemy, but she constantly challenges his beliefs about her people and the world they live in. And on occasion, she punctuates things with the phrase, "You know nothing, Jon Snow."
I could teach you how to do it.
I know how to do it.
You know nothing, Jon Snow. You know nothing, Jon Snow. You know nothing, Jon Snow.
I know you won't hurt me.
You know nothing, Jon Snow. You should have stayed in that cave.
We'll go back there.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
This repeated phrase works because it tracks the ups and downs of their journey and their relationship. Each time the phrase is spoken, it carries new meaning. It's used at times of romantic tension and romantic release. It's used at times of threat and danger. And it's used during major life and death confrontations. And the phrase also echoes the theme of Jon's expanding worldview. Ygritte is challenging him to prove her wrong about who he is and how he relates to her people. The fifth type of bad dialogue is clunky comebacks. And whenever a hero and villain have a major confrontation, we often see a dialogue exchange before the battle. Usually the villain will insult or intimidate the hero, and then the hero gets a chance to respond. However, sometimes the hero's response just falls flat, and it ends up making the hero look like an idiot. The hero's comeback remark should sound intimidating or epic, but instead it comes off as dull, uninspired, or pathetic. A bad example comes from The Dark Knight Rises. And during the final battle, when the Gotham police force is fighting against Bane's army, Batman approaches Bane, and they're about to have this big rematch. It's been building up for the whole movie, and right before the battle, they have this exchange.
So you came back to die with your city?
I came back to stop you.
This sucks because Batman's response is way too literal and it's completely uninspired. It feels like placeholder dialogue, something that the writers just penciled in for the moment, but they meant to come up with something better, but at the end they just said, you know what, we're just gonna go with this. Batman's response sucks the air right out of the scene. It should be this thoroughly epic rematch, but it gets off on the wrong foot because of what he says. And honestly, it would have been better if Batman said nothing at all, and if he just answered with action. And that brings us to our good example, which comes from The Empire Strikes Back. And if you remember, right before the lightsaber battle between Luke and Darth Vader, they have this dialogue exchange.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker.
But you are not a Jedi yet.
Luke's silence works here because it builds tension. It draws out the moment and it creates hype for this major duel. His actions do the talking, and Luke doesn't say anything that can spoil the moment. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do. Sometimes if you can't come up with anything clever or anything fancy, just go with silence. Let your heroes act and take care of what they need to do. So I hope this helps. And now I'm curious what you think. Are there any examples of bad dialogue that you can think of that fit into any of the 5 categories I mentioned today? Let us know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. If you want to support the channel, check out one of my books. Bad Parts is great if you like small town horror. It's about people who trade away their body parts in order to get healthy again. And if you like thrillers, definitely check out Entry Wounds. It's about a guy who picks up a haunted gun and he cannot put it down until he kills 6 people with it. I'll link to both books in the description below, and also be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me, share this video with a friend, and as always, remember to keep on writing.